Well, good afternoon, everybody. Um, Welcome to the RedSocks webinar about the WannaCry malware. I'm going to briefly explain to you what happened in the last few days. But let me first introduce myself. My name is Ricky Jeevers. I'm a malware intelligence analyst here, and I'm trying to explain as good as possible to all of the viewers what happened last weekend. You can chat with me. We have an open chat, and I have two colleagues next to me talking to you in the chat or briefing the questions towards me. Um, let's start with the best advice and the right advice in the beginning. Um, what we've seen is a very large scale pandemic of ransomware. What is the difference with normal ransomware we've seen so far? Normally, you will see one computer that gets infected, and you have to pay a ransom for like $50 or something. You pay the ransom, and your computer gets unlocked. But in this case, we've seen whole companies that get ransomware on all of their computers. So the big difference is the whole scale that we are talking about right now. Um, does this pose another problem to the cyber criminals? Yes, it does, in the sense that people often like to pay $50 and get their files back, but people will hardly ever pay, as in this case, $300 to get their whole company back. They're going to have to pay $300 for every single individual system within the company, and that's most likely one of the reasons not that many people paid so far. Um, Let me give you the shortest advice at this moment that one could get. If you want to prevent your company from getting infected with this type of malware, just install all of the Microsoft updates right now. There's one simple solution to all of these problems, and that is installing these patches. The reason we are seeing companies right now that are being ransomware on all of their computers is just because they didn't install the patches. The patch has been there for 3 weeks, but those companies didn't install the patches. So do it right now if you do not have it installed at the moment. Um, as I said, the big difference here is that normally you'll see one computer that is infected, and right now we are seeing whole computers that are or whole networks of companies that get infected. And the main reason is because of one exploit. And the exploit uses a vulnerability in the Microsoft system, which is patched by Microsoft by patch MS17010. And this exploit was found by the NSA. And that's a situation we are not familiar with as of today. There's some discussion. We used to have a patch in 2008. That patch was MS08067. Those two bugs look very familiar, but they are not. What happened here is that we had a hacker group that called themselves the Shadow Brokers. A lot of people think the Shadow Brokers are somewhat related to the Russian government. But what happened here is that most likely several servers from the NSA got compromised. Those cyber criminals stole the cyber weapons that the NSA is using on their servers, and eventually they decided to leak all of that information to the whole public. At first they started an auction, but they wanted a lot of money in there. They didn't get that money, and eventually they just dropped all of the exploits out there in the public. The NSA saw all of this coming, so what they did actually is that most likely they investigated what was stolen during the breach of the Shadow Brokers. They tipped off Microsoft because they knew this exploit was out there in the open in the wrong hands. Microsoft released a patch for this vulnerability, but in the meantime the Shadow Brokers put the exploit out there online. So those cyber criminals stole this exploit, embedded the exploit within their ransomware, and put it out there in the open. What you see here right now is that a lot of people and companies actually think that the ransomware spread during the normal ways. And most ransomware spread, and that is through malicious links or malicious attachments to emails. Thus far, we haven't seen any of those emails actually. So the most likely way this malware has been spreading is actually through the exploit itself. That means that the companies that got infected right now somewhere have a computer attached to the internet that has the SMB protocol open. SMB protocol having open, that means that you have port 445 open to the internet. Any normal router within a network will block that port. But if you connect your computer directly to the internet, there could be a case where you have that computer open. And as I said, once one computer within a company is infected, it spreads laterally very quickly through the local network. Then I'm going to get to the next question. What is the impact for those organizations? I'm going to be very short. If you don't update those computers properly, you're going to have one very big problem. Once one computer is infected within the network, it's going to spread very rapidly through your network, and there's probably not any way apart from disconnecting the computers to stop the outbreak within your network. So be sure you have this patch installed right now. If we're going to compare the previously mentioned exploit I talked about in 2008, which produced the configure worm, we see a big difference within impact that we are seeing right now. If you look at configure is a worm that spread to the MS08067 vulnerability, and the impact of configure was a lot bigger than we are seeing today. The only difference actually is that configure infected the computers, but didn't do that much. You could get some fake antivirus, for example, on your computer, but your computer kept functioning. That basically means that if you have a very important computer, that computer gets infected, you, in the worst case scenario, just see a pop-up that tells you that your computer has some sort of virus and that you need to pay for it, but that's it. Your computer kept functioning. The difference we are seeing right now is that your computer will get locked, all of your files will get encrypted, and you're going to have to pay in Bitcoins in order to make your computer work again. So that's a very huge difference, of course, if we compare this attack to the attack we've seen in 2008. Another thing is the discussion surrounding the fact that this exploit was developed by the NSA. There's a lot of opinions right now. I have my own opinion, and I'm going to tell you my opinion right now. My opinion is actually that the NSA is to blame for developing the exploit, but the NSA is not to blame for the impact of the exploit. And the main reason here is that people highlight that the NSA is actively searching for those kind of vulnerabilities. That is true, that's absolutely true. But that doesn't mean that if the NSA doesn't look for vulnerabilities, these sort of vulnerabilities won't be found in the near future. They will be found. We will keep getting this sort of vulnerabilities in the future. So in my opinion, what we're seeing here that's going wrong is the patching, and especially the timing of the patching. If you'd ask me, these sort of vulnerabilities happen once every 5 or maybe 10 years. And that basically means, if we look at configure, for example, in 2008, we've seen that those criminals reverse engineered the patch. They were able to make an exploit for it, and within 3 weeks we had configure. Right now we had the patch 3 weeks ago as well. So if you compare the timing, that basically tells you that you have 3 weeks once the patch is out in order to patch all of your systems and not have any problem with the infections going around through the world. The difference here, if we look at the NSA and their responsibility, is basically that if we take out the NSA here, as I said, we still have those vulnerabilities, and that still means that people will be too late with patching. Those criminals will still be able to reverse engineer those patches, and they will still be able to develop their malware and spread it around the globe. So taking out the NSA here, or preventing the NSA from hoarding vulnerabilities, will never solve this problem. There's only one solution to solve this problem, and that is make sure that people patch their systems. It's something everybody knows. Everybody knows that you should always update your computer. You should always update your telephone. But in practice, we're still seeing a lot of people that are not updating their telephones or their computers. A lot of people also mentioned to me that there are many reasons for people not to update their systems, and that is absolutely true. There are a million reasons for a person not to update his computer, but there are not a million reasons for a person to not update the whole company. And that is basically where the difference lays. You can have one computer within your network that is not able to apply patches, for example, but not all of your computers. And that's also the difference we are seeing today. Whole companies get shut down because all of the computers do not receive their updates. Um, that's basically my opinion surrounding this subject. Um, there's a lot of discussion going on, and I think that this will continue, but uh, to me, it doesn't really solve the puzzle. I do think we have a solution here, and I think the main problem basically lies within the essence of the patch. System administrators receive updates every month, every Tuesday, first Tuesday of the month. There are around 10 to 20 updates within those releases, but none of those, the patches are actually rated, but nobody looks at those rating. Every system administrator knows this. And I think it should be time that Microsoft is able to push some sort of patch. As I said, it happens maybe once every 5 or 10 years. So I think it's reasonable that there should be some sort of push mechanism that system administrators know that this patch should absolutely be applied on their systems, because this is an extremely critical update, a wormable update. And once you say wormable, every Microsoft engineer is starting to frighten. Uh, so people should apply this patch directly, and that's the big difference. If there's anybody with questions, I challenge you to ask them right now, because we have a short time slot right now to answer those questions. So let me take a look at my colleague and see if we have some questions.
There's one question. If NSA knew, why did they not stop it by letting Microsoft know and patch it?
Let me repeat the question. If NSA knew, why did they not stop it by letting Microsoft know and patch it? Well, they actually let Microsoft know it, and they let Microsoft patch it. But the whole problem is, again, that people didn't patch their systems. So if you patch your system, nothing's happening, and you will not get infected. But yeah, people didn't patch their systems. So that's the whole difference, and that's the problem we are seeing right now. So if we can solve the patching problem, we'll see that those global pandemics won't happen again. Uh, I'm going to switch to several other questions. Are we seeing an uprise in payments right now? Yes, we do. The funny fact is actually that there are several Twitter accounts where you can follow the money streams that will go into the Bitcoin wallets of those criminals, and we are seeing some sort of uptick right now, where we are seeing more transactions towards those wallets at the moment. So that basically means it's Monday, people started working, their computers are locked, and they want to receive their computer back, so they're paying money. Um, another question here is, if you pay the money, will you get your computer back? And that's a very good question, actually. I don't know at the moment whether you get your computer back. I do know of several cases in the past where usually people do get their computer back and their files back. Um, I can imagine that there are people that don't have backups, for example, lose all of their pictures, and they're allowed actually to or are willing to pay those $300 to get all of their historical pictures back. I would never recommend people paying, but if there's no other solution for you to get all of your historical pictures back, um, I'd be a person to pay those $300. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you do get your files back. Those guys are still criminals, and if there's any person on the planet that's not reliable, it's probably a criminal. So be aware. Don't just randomly pay. See if you have other options, and use it as a last option if you're going to pay.
Another question, Ricky, from one of our viewers is that his organization has a lot of home users. Are they vulnerable for the WannaCry outbreak?
Yeah, very good question. Are home users vulnerable to WannaCry? Yes, they are. But in practice, we are actually seeing that home users are usually more up to date than company networks are. So you don't see the large scale outbreaks there, but make sure your home computer is updated as well. If you are not, you can get infected, especially if you have your computer directly attached on the internet. Any other questions?
Another question comes in asking about the method that is used to spread WannaCry.
Yeah, I mentioned it previously already. We are assuming actually that ransomware is spread through malicious URLs or malicious attachments. But what we are seeing today is actually that it's spreading to the exploit MS17 010, and that's the exploit of the shadow brokers. And the thing is basically that it spreads within networks, laterally in the network. And if you attach those computers to the internet, those will be infected as well. So it's a very effective way of very rapidly spreading within networks.
Okay, another question, Ricky, is one of our viewers asking how can Dutch or organizations in general can protect themselves against these kind of outbreaks, apart of course from updating regularly?
Yeah, there's just one solution, and the main solution is of course updating. But if you are not able to update a system, for example, isolate the system. Make sure that the internet or other computers are not able to reach that computers. And if you especially need some sort of connection between computers, make sure those are trusted environments. But the main reason here is always update your machines. And if there's really no reason to update it, make sure you isolate the computer and make sure nobody else is able to touch it. Any other questions?
Yeah, there is one question. 90% of the infections are from Russia. Is that explainable? And do we have to worry in Holland about infections?
Yeah, the funny thing we're seeing here right now is that 90% of the infections is in Russia. And there's, at this moment, not a good reason to explain the amount of infections there. But the thing that should be noted by this virus is the way it spreads. It starts at one place and then exponentially surrounds its environment. So it could be that the infection started within Russia, and that would explain the amount of infections there, because you need one infection, and from one infection you go to 50,000 infections, and then it starts to spread very rapidly. So the reason could be that it used to have a very strong foothold within Russia, and that could be the reason why we see so many infections in Russia at the moment. But usually cyber criminals actually do not infect their systems within Russia. A lot of the traditional cyber criminals actually come from Russia, especially within the ransomware scene, although ransomware, because of the usage of Bitcoin, is very easy to use for anyone on the planet. But it's very remarkable that we are seeing so many infections within Russia at the moment. But it doesn't tell us anything. If we're looking towards the potential, or at least the people that we think are behind this operation, at this moment we have no clue at all who is behind this operation. But I can tell you, if you attract so much attention, at least people surrounding those criminals often start to quickly talk. So I guess the people responsible for this malware outbreak will pop up somewhere on the radar very quickly. It's very hard to stay in the shadow if you attract so much attention, at least. I see we have another question. That question is about the kill switch. The kill switch is actually a very funny story here. What we believe here at RedSocks is actually that we've analyzed the malware, and we saw this kill switch being present there. And we actually think that it was not some sort of kill switch, but it was actually a sandbox detection mechanism. what you often see within sandboxes is actually that if you run malware within a sandbox, it starts to resolve a lot of domains, and those sandboxes actually answer those DNS questions with an IP address. And this criminal knew that this domain was not registered, so in order to detect whether he was in a sandbox, he started to resolve that domain name. And once it started to resolve, it shuts down the malware because it knew it was within a sandbox. The funny thing here is actually that a personal friend of mine in this case started to analyze this malware. He saw this domain coming by, and one of the things he always does is he tries to get visibility within botnets. So what he does is he registers a lot of domains to see what sort of connections are coming in order to estimate the amount of infections that they are seeing. So he saw this domain passing by, he registered the domain, and from that moment on the malware stopped working. So he accidentally triggered the kill switch, which is actually some sort of sandbox detection. And if we look at the whole thing, that basically, or at least that's happening right now, all of the malware actually thinks that it is running in a sandbox, and that's the reason it terminates all of the activities at the moment. Do we have any other questions?
I have one question from Italy. Someone has been infected and asks if RedSocks can help in any way. Can you explain something about that?
Yeah, we have our incident response team standing ready behind me. Actually, they're not behind me because they're on the scene right now. But if you have very serious problems at the moment, you can always call in. Our contact details are also below this webinar. I do recommend that if the issues are very serious, you only call us because our hotlines at this moment are like overblown at the moment. So if you do have very serious problems, I'd recommend you call us, and we can be on the scene very rapidly and help you with your problems. The problem here with this type of malware is actually that usually the damage is already done. So we have a backup plan in a sense that we're trying to get your company back up running and without that malware and online again as soon as possible. Any other questions?
Yep.
This is a question from the chat on YouTube. Someone's asking if there's any other version of SMB, if it's vulnerable or just SMB1.
Yeah, very good question. What we know actually is that SMB version 1 is vulnerable, but within the malware, embedded within the malware, we are seeing strings of SMB version 2 as well. But we haven't at the office, at least, we haven't tested this vulnerability. But there's reason at least to assume that SMB version 2 is compromised as well. But I cannot confirm this at the moment. But you can always make sure that you have the patch installed. So all of the SMB versions are patched by Microsoft at least, and you are not vulnerable to this type of attack. Do we have another question here?
Yes, someone is asking if using Shodan you can see WannaCrypt not activated yet. Could this be a bigger problem than first anticipated? Might be a bit of a technical question.
I don't know exactly what you mean with that it's not activated yet. Shodan is a very good way actually to index the world and see what is happening on the maps. They have several ways of detecting command and control servers, for example, and they're doing a very good job. If you connect your computer on the internet, you'll see them passing by once every day, about once every day. So Shodan does see a lot, but they don't see everything. We at RedSocks have a lot of developed our own tools to be a little bit quicker and more precisely than Shodan is, but Shodan is very helpful at least. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the question so I can answer the question more properly.
Yeah, we have a question, Ricky, about the future. Is there anything in your vision you can tell about this kind of outbreaks? What do you see happening now?
Yeah, a very good question. As I said, this sort of vulnerability only happens once every 5 or 10 years. We used to think that our computer systems get more secure by time. History has taught us that this is not the case, so I do think this will continue to happen. We do see a lot of extra diversity within the platform landscape. So that basically means that we have Mac OS, we have a lot of Linux systems, we have a lot of Windows operating systems, and now we also have Android telephones and Windows phones, anything you can imagine. And there are more and more popping up. And one of the benefits actually is that this type of attack only works on one platform, in this case all of the Windows versions. So if you have a Mac computer or a Linux computer, those ones will never get infected. And if we get a more diverse landscape, that also means that the scale of these sort of attacks will be lower. But let's be honest, nowadays we still all work on Windows computers, and that means that those Windows vulnerabilities will continue to exist. I do have to mention though that Windows 10 has been designed with security in mind, and Windows 10 is significantly more secure than any other operating system. But future will tell us whether we're gonna see this type of outbreak again. Any other questions? Some from the chat.
There's one here.
Did the virus attack shadow copies inside Windows? To be honest, I have no idea whether they did that. We didn't test those kind of things yet. But I do think that I know what you're referring to. If you are able to install a backup, whether it's a Windows backup or another backup mechanism, at least try so and see whether it works. And this is a very good question. I think that's one of the first things that we're going to test right now in our labs. But I cannot directly answer it right now. I just don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry about that. Do we have any other questions left?
No, we haven't.
Okay. The last thing I can remind you, if you're a network operator or at least a system administrator and you're willing to know whether a computer within your network might be infected at the moment, take a look at the traffic and see if you have, for example, Tor traffic passing through your network from endpoints that you're not aware of. And of course, the best solution is, of course, make sure that the Microsoft updates are installed on any computer within your network. If you have any other questions, our contact details are below, so you can easily reach us out. You can call us. We have an emergency hotline 24/7 open at the moment. And don't be shy for asking any questions. We can help with anything you can imagine. And absolutely do this, because time is ticking and it's a race against time. So make sure you're directly in contact with us so we can help you with proper advice at least. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope to see you soon in another webinar. And make sure that you have all of the patches installed. And take care. See you.